The purpose of this video is to see how to apply trend lines to data that you have graphed using Excel. We're going to start with the same set of data that we've used before, and I want to start with creating a graph. So I'm going to select these first two columns, and I'm going to go to Insert and Charts and go to Scatter, and we definitely want to insert this scattered data here. So now we want to actually insert the trend line. So there are at least two different ways to do this. One is if you right-click on the data itself, you can see this option to add trend line. So that's one option. The other option is you'll see this plus sign here under chart elements. If you go click on that and then go to trend line, and then you can actually, you want to kind of go over to this little arrow here, and you want to go to more options. So either way, you end up bringing up this other window. So there are a number of different options available. The default that's always selected is linear, and that's what it's actually showing right now, this linear trend line. You have to be careful about intentionally selecting a trend line. In this case, we are going to go with linear, and I can click the two useful things down here to click on are display equation on chart and display r-squared value on chart. And so you can see that there's an equation that shows up here. I can move it around and this r-squared value. Now the r-squared value is a statistical number that describes how closely the trend line fits the data. And if r-squared equaled 1, then that would mean it fits the data perfectly. In this case, it's 0.9893, which is pretty good. When Excel creates a trend line, it always uses the variables x and y. So this is like your linear equation, y equals mx plus b. So m is the slope, 0.4077, and b is the intercept. Now often, in fact, most of the time, x and y are not meaningful symbols for our values. So let's say I'm just going to change this. You can go in here with your mouse and edit this. So instead of y, I'm going to backspace and put v. So let's say I'm talking about the velocity. And maybe I can also say, maybe I only want 3 sig fig, so I'll manually change that to 0.408. And then maybe I will change the x to t, and then I will change this to 0.730. So I can do that manually, and that gives me that trend line value, or the equation for the trend line. Now, let me delete this one. So let's say I'm interested in this other graph. So I'm going to select the A column and the C column, and I now am going to insert this as a scatter, and we get a graph or data points that look like this. So now I want to apply a trend line again, so I'm going to click this plus button, go to trend line. I will apply this little arrow, go to more options, and again the default is a linear trend line. I can set the equation on it and the r-squared value, and we can look at that. Another thing we can do is if you highlight all that text, if you go back to home where the font size is, we can make that larger. So maybe I'll make that size 12, just easier to see. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to the trend line, and we can see r-squared is 0.55, which isn't very good, and you can see that this linear trend line doesn't really fit all that well. So we might say, well, what about exponential? Well, we get something that looks like that curve there. We could click down here. Actually, the one that will be useful is polynomial. So let me delete the linear trend line, and I'm going to delete the fit of the linear trend line. I'm going to go to polynomial. You see it's a nice, fits very nicely there. And if I do the equation and the r-squared value, you see the r-squared is now 0.9947. And this is a polynomial, second order polynomial, so y equals 0.0508x squared minus 0.7757x plus 4.2874. The order of the polynomial is controlled over here on the right, so you could make this a third order, fourth order, or whatever. You can do whatever you want with that. If I remove that trend line and I decide I'm going to go back here and just show one other option. Later on in the semester, we'll also be using power. Obviously, power trend line does not look very good here, but I will display it anyway. So power is y is equal to 1.4765 times x raised to the 0.3107. The r squared is even worse than linear. It's 0.1714. So the thing to be aware of, again, is that you have all these different options with the trend line, and you need to make an informed decision when you use a trend line, and plotting out the equation is helpful. Also, changing the symbols into something more meaningful. So maybe this is somehow acceleration, and I can change the x to t and the y to a. And again, for sig figs, maybe I want to, in this case, go with 2 sig figs, so I can just change those manually. Maybe I want to even change my r squared to 0.99. And one last thing that we can do, we can put units on here. So let's say this is acceleration, so the units would be meters per second squared. So I'm going to type meters with a slash s for seconds. I'll type the number 2. I can then highlight this number 2 and go up to font. It's under home. And if you click on the little arrow here for font settings, the first thing that comes up towards the bottom, you can apply a superscript. So this is kind of a way to make it look like a power. So I'm going to click on superscript. And since I only had the number 2 highlighted, it'll only apply superscript to that, so it looks like meters per second squared. So putting units on this equation is also helpful.